need to be worn on Fridays. But I think now it's generally accepted. So we'll deepen that intervention. We talked also about using government procurement as a vehicle for making sure that we promote made in Ghana goods. So level of detail, I'm sure I'll be able to do that, but I don't think
the detail. It was just an example that I wanted. I thought that was what I had. Anyway, in your earlier answer to a question, you said that by the time you were leaving the Ministry of Trade, the districts in Ghana were 110. Did I hear that?
I at my time when I was exiting, I mean, I stand to correction, but
because I remember you left around 2007, right? You left the ministry around 2007.
Yeah, 2007.
And by the close of 2006, we had 138 districts.
Okay, well,
so when you talk about the 110 hours,
I appreciate it. Okay. I appreciate it. We worked on 100 business plans.
Well, when you were answering earlier about the one district, one factory, you talked about diagnosis studies, a team at the ministry to look at business plans and review them. We have 216 districts.
It's not a question of 6 months. And so that is part of how we'll deal with it. In actual fact, in cases where we are lucky to identify investors who have shown an interest to lead the entire process, the issue of government even preparing a business plan may not even come in. And so there are so many ways of looking at this. Maybe the numbers might seem frightening, but Honorable Minister, I'm suggesting to you that when we decided to start this program and the groundwork was done, most of these things that we're talking about were done in less than 6 months. So it can be done.
My worry is, with a greater respect, you've had the previous experience of doing almost about 110, and you knew that around that time, let's say, even if it is a raw, government has to provide the chunk of the resources, it was going to cost an average of, say, $100,000 per medium scale. So it gives you an idea that even as you prepare to do it now, you are likely to use an X amount. But you say if we are lucky, so somebody decide to take up, are we going to be relying on luck? Because you just said that. You said that if we are lucky, we'll get a private partner who is ready to take them up, then government may not even need to. So I'm just talking about specifically some numbers, because I don't want to believe that in all the thinking that we are doing, we are not looking at a possible number in terms of amount for that support.
Mr. Chairman, respectfully, Honorable Member, I'm not clear about why you are linking it to if we are lucky. But because I only said that you wanted to know how we are going to prepare these business plans. And I gave an indication as to how they will be done. And I'm saying that in some cases, the responsibility of preparing a business plan may not even lie on government. You may have a private sector investor who decides to take up that responsibility. So it's only in that respect. But that is different from the issue of you soliciting information on potentially how much it will cost. I hope that is clear. Now, in respect of that, I was resistant in giving numbers. But if you ask me about ballpark figures, I would say that we are looking at a range of between $1 million US and then $5 million US on the upper threshold. Because by definition, I've said categorically that these are projects that have the potential to affect fundamentally the economy of the district and also create opportunities for massive employment. Now, when we talk about employment, it is not only the factory jobs. This whole transformation, industrial transformation agenda is supposed to deepen agricultural production and productivity. So many of them will be agro-processing activities. So the jobs will come primarily from the agricultural side and then also the transformation side. So if you look at both the plantation development, and then the factory structures, including the kind of machinery and equipment you are looking at. If you've been in business, you realize that it is reasonable to suppose that that will be the range that we are looking at. Now, if you took that range, government will not make a determination ab initio that we are going to take 80% of the equity. It doesn't make sense. You want the private sector to lead. It's on a case-by-case basis. If, for example, the private sector generally decide that in each of these cases they want to take 70% equity, which will be a reasonable balance, and government takes 30%, then you take a median figure of, let's say, $3 million per district enterprise. Then you have to calculate, let's say, 70% of that total cost being contributed by the private sector, and 30% coming from the government. And in that particular case, that 30% coming from government then will become government, and it could also be contribution in kind, as I said. But I thought that these were details that might not be.
Well, I'm happy to hear that the thinking is between $1 to $5 million for medium to large-scale companies. That's the support. Do you have an idea the numbers in terms of employment that this medium to large-scale may be able to take, that's employ, including all the other auxiliary activities? What are your rough expectations?
If we use an example such as the Ayekoo starch factory, which typically, all things being equal, will qualify for a district enterprise. Because at the time it was set up, the total cost was around 5 million, 6 million. But that is total cost, equity plus debt. Now, so if we took that as an example, in the first year of operation, there were 8,000 farmers that were supplying cassava to this one factory. The factory employees would be about maybe 70 employees. Now, so if we are looking at the total potential for job creation, I think you can look at the figures. Now, so that's just for one factory. Now, if we were multiplying and doing an extension on the same basis, I think, Honorable Member, you can look at it.
But you know that, unfortunately, we've not been able to manage the psyche of most of our youth in thinking. I mean, I own a farm. I'm struggling to get the full labor requirement because people just think that half of farming is not part of what you promise. Now you are looking at, for example, in the agri sector, more of it will be the farmers. That means we have a lot of work to do. But anyway, let me just move. Earlier, in a question about financing, you said you were going to get the Bank of Ghana to reduce rates. You were going to interest rates. You were going to get the Treasury bill rate to come down so that it doesn't become an incentive. You reduce borrowing, as even stated in your own manifesto. But the Minister of Finance designate just on Friday told us here, in the first quarter of this year alone, your government is looking at 1.9 billion Ghana cedis borrowing. You think that with that level of borrowing, it is...
Honorable Member, please, let's get the records right. What he said was that the deficit is 1.9 billion.
No. I asked him, and he said yes. They are buying bonds worth 1.9 billion Ghana cedis in this first quarter. And the finance minister, we can check the record.
But we would have the record so that it will be clear. But what I know is that there was a deficit between planned, and that is the estimate that was brought to the House and approved versus the revenue that has come. That's what he was talking.
Chairman, I would support my whip and to share the record. In terms of deficit, it was mentioned by both Engineer Yao Safumafu and Ken Oforiatta to be between 8 to 9% of GDP in terms of deficit. For the record, this is what came before us. What he's referring to entirely borders on what he mentioned earlier. In terms of deficit, for this record here, we're told it will be between 8 to 9% of GDP.
But anyway, it is said, I asked the finance minister and he did confirm that they'll be borrowing to be able to close the gap in the first quarter alone. Do you think with the independence of Bank of Ghana, you will be able to get Bank of Ghana to reduce interest rate and to reduce treasury bill rate?
Honorable Chairman and Honorable Member, respectfully, I'm not sure it will be prudent for me to be speaking on behalf of either the Senior Minister or the Minister of Finance. But if you just ask my own view on this matter, what I can say is that, in fact, we have no choice. That's the first thing. All the things we are talking about in helping our industries to become competitive, we have no choice to make sure that interest rates come down. And if you understand how interest rates are set, there are a number of factors. One is the Bank of Ghana policy rate. Now, the Bank of Ghana policy rate is the floor rate at which banks, commercial banks, will borrow from the central bank. So, obviously, if a commercial bank is borrowing from the central bank at 25%, as it is now, 25.5%, then you cannot expect that they would lend at a rate lower than 25%. So whether we like it or not, the Bank of Ghana policy rate would have to come down. Now, as to over what period, to what extent, I think we cannot discuss that. The second element is also reducing the risk, because banks actually charge interest rates based on the profiling the risk of those who are borrowing. Now, with the kinds of interventions that we are talking about, I can assure you that the risk profile of many companies would improve. So that again will be a signal for banks. And maybe we should not get into the details, but
well, I was just drawing your attention that per the Bank of Ghana Act, they were independent. They are supposed to be absolutely independent. And then because you kept emphasizing it has to reduce, it as though you control that. I mean, these are things that is in the complete remit of Bank of Ghana. That was what I was trying to draw attention to. Let me just ask, between 2001 to 2003, you were the Ghana's ambassador to the United States of America, right? Did you declare your assets?
Honorable Member, just for clarification, did I declare my assets as
a public officer?
As a public officer, I'm sure I did. I can't remember. If it was a requirement, then obviously I'm sure I did.
So you are sure you did?
I'm saying if it was a requirement, because I think if it's a requirement, before you take office.
If you look at the 1992 Constitution, specifically 286, it clearly states all persons like you and I will have to declare our assets every 4 years. And then at the time of exiting, you also declare. So my expectation is that you should have declared your asset 3 times. First, when you got the appointment as ambassador. Second, when you became the Minister of Trade. And then in 2007, when you exited. And I'm just asking, did you declare your assets?
Honourable Member, as I indicated, I'm sure I did, unless there's evidence to suggest otherwise. And otherwise, if it was a requirement, I'm sure I did. If not, then you maybe we can establish that.
Can you switch off your phone? We want to be clear. Can you speak positively to that, or you're sure? If you're not sure, it's a different thing.
Honorable Chairman, I'm not sure. I don't have a recollection on that.
I know if I look at your manifesto, page 23 and 24 of the MPP manifesto, there's this clause that talks about providing reliable and cost-effective mix. Mix, that's in the energy. That's the cost of energy. What do you mean by that?
Remember page 20?
Page 23 and 24, but this one is specifically on page 23. It's under industry. Yes, that's a C. Providing a reliable and cost-effective mix of energy supply for businesses. And I want to ask, what specifically are you intending to do to create this so-called effective mix?
Honorable Chairman, Honorable Member, the Minister Designate for Energy and Petroleum, I'm sure, will address this. Here, the statement is referring to the job creation agenda being underpinned by the following. So it does not indicate that it's the responsibility of the Ministry of Trade and Industry.
Well, I'm happy to hear that, but let me say, in the manifesto, you were one of those always on the platform saying that we shall reduce the cost of energy. You remember that? For businesses, we will reduce the campaign platforms. And you were specifically saying that because you are going to be in charge of trade, and part of it is the production, the local industries, as you've been saying since morning. And you've been talking about reducing the cost of energy, the cost of electricity. I'm saying, how do you intend to do that?
Mr. Chairman, an honorable member, if I made a declaration that we will, I'm speaking on behalf of the party. So if you want my personal, I have a lot of information and ideas to share. I don't think this is the right forum, but if you wanted me to respond specifically, I could suggest some ideas, but I think it might take.
Maybe what I will say, because I have a former trade minister next to me, one of their biggest battles that when the Minister for Energy comes, he'll be telling you the bottom line. ECG will have to pay its bills. VRA will have to be able to pay their bills. Greco will have to pay their bills. So you, as a trade minister, will have to be putting a convincing argument as to why they should accept, the Minister of Energy or Minister of Power should accept the suggested effective mix that will make businesses thrive. That's why I have to ask you, what is your actual thinking when you talk about this mix?
Very well, Mr. Chairman, maybe just to suggest some ideas as to how I would approach it. For example, if you read the substance of what we propose to do, our transformation agenda is also anchored on the establishment of industrial zones, dedicated zones that will provide land space for industries. Now, in that regard, we have proposed that we would have renewable energy sources, which will be easier to customize to land spaces for industrial zones, for example. Secondly, we've made a submission to the effect that we would give specific incentives to investors who want to provide energy specific to industrial establishment. that will provide specific incentives. So this will not be generic, but for those who want to provide specific energy supply to industrial parks, will provide incentives for them to do so. And last but not the least, also, even though I don't have the concurrence of my colleague, the Minister Designate, it is only in a few countries where you have the costs of energy, electricity to domestic users, or let's say to industrial users, being higher than what is paid by domestic users. In many matured economies, it is the other way around. So when we talk about cost-effective energy supply to industries, we are saying that we have no choice but to make sure that we recalibrate our tariff structure such that it supports industrial development. So this is not rocket science. It only means that you will consciously have a tariff structure that makes energy supply cost-effective to enable our industries to become competitive.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I promise this is my very last. You spoke about the industrial zones. You know the nature of our businesses in this country. In a residential area, there's a thriving business. In some areas, they are just in the middle of the city. Now, the distribution lines for ECG, or for that matter, Northern Electricity, even if you get the companies, independent power producers, to produce because they are going to support industry, they'll be using the distribution line of ECG. They'll be using the distribution line for ECG or through GRICO or through Northern Electricity. How will you be able to target the specific industries that you may want to give this intervention? If you want to use that line of argument, get independent power producers who come and produce only for industry.
Honorable Chair and Honorable Member, I think that even we have a current example here where the mining companies have specific IPPs that are providing. You see, I think the challenge we have here is not to think that every power supply interface must be grid connected. In fact, we are suggesting in this statement that we move away from that, because that is one of the reasons why the cost of energy is high. If you are doing something in, I should use Laura again. Okay. Why would you want necessarily to use grid-connected supply if there are other ways of introducing energy sources that will be dedicated? I mean, there are technical considerations that make this possible. So, Honorable, I'm not sure you need to be worried about that.
Thank you, Chairman. I want to ask the Minister Designate if you have laid out strategies or steps that you take to support the automobile industries. We very much know, we very much appreciate the fact that many such industries have existed in the past. Many have started assembling vehicles in this country in the past. And many of such industries have collapsed. I want to ask you if you have any policies or steps to take to support existing ones, and as you said, to revive older or old industries that have collapsed in the system. And I will ignore all comments. And how, looking at it in connection with the PPP arrangements that this government has in mind, and also fitting it into the one district, one factory, because it exists in, many of these exist in districts or constituencies for that matter. So how do you intend to support such industries? Thank you.
Honorable Chair, I must thank the honorable member for bringing up this issue, because it reinforces one of the components that I talked about. I didn't have the opportunity to elaborate on. I think this falls under our strategic anchor initiatives to develop the vehicle assembly plant. As you rightly alluded to, this is something that we started doing in the 70s, or even earlier than that. But unfortunately, we've not been able as a government to keep our focus on that. I think the direct answer to your question is that we will start identifying the existing ones that have the capacity or are already engaged in this line of business. Secondly, we want to be able to provide any support that will enable them to become competitive as is now. But thirdly, and more importantly, we want to be able to use our leverage of attracting foreign direct investments to bring in partners who can then support and work alongside local companies who have already taken an initiative in this regard. So as I keep on suggesting, it will be on a case-by-case basis. If there are local industries already engaged in this, we will take them up to the next level. But we have a very big vision. And when we talk about vehicle assembly, we are looking at being able to take this, to internationally competitive standards. So whatever it takes for us to support local and foreign companies in that particular sector, the government is committed to do that.
Thank you. I would also want to ask, many of our local industries, we tend to fold up or collapse due to the heavy taxation that, or heavy taxes that they ought to pay, especially for the new or young or growing industries. We want to know from you, since you have continuously committed that you're going to promote local industries, what will be some of the things that, together with the Ministry of Finance or working in collaboration with the Ministry of Finance, what will be some of the tax holidays that you'll be giving to these industries to enable them to survive, and at the end of the day also create more jobs if they are sustained for the many able and energetic youth of this country who definitely have hope that there will be jobs created in this era. Thank you.
Honorable Chair, Honorable Member, first, we've made a commitment to reduce corporate taxes from 25% to 20%. We know and believe that this would have a positive effect on the competitiveness of our local industries, because during our previous term of office, we reduced it from 32% to 25%. and we saw the benefit. So that's one. We also have committed to reduce or to abolish duties on imported raw materials, machinery, and equipment. And I think for many people who are into industrial development, they recognize the importance of such a policy measure. We've also talked about abolishing the special import levy. We are also committed in making sure that all the duties, levies that are charged on imports at the port, because it's not only the ones that we are talking about. There are several charges, levies that are imposed at the ports. For example, we commit to reduce or in specific cases eliminate these. Now for smaller companies, I'm sure the point has been made that we would make sure that the 17.5% VAT charged for companies, including micro enterprises, now will be reduced for micro and small enterprises to 3%. This is something that was introduced previously in our administration. So there's a whole cocktail of duties, levies that will going to be addressed. This is part of the policy reform that we'll be looking at. So if it's only in respect of tax reform, then these are some of the examples. Yes, but then, sorry. If I may also add that part of the responsibility of this business development component of our agenda would be to continuously engage with the private sector to ensure that before any new taxes, levies, or duties are imposed, that they conform to certain prescribed guidelines. So we don't introduce them and then later on have to withdraw them.
Chairman, let me thank you for the opportunity and to join you in congratulating.
Thank you, Honorable Member. We've made a commitment in respect of that, but my understanding is that at the appropriate time, a representation will be made to the Attorney General for the necessary process to be initiated. And so I cannot.
Should we expect it in your first economic policy and budget statement to Ghanaians, since you were emphatic yesterday and emphatic this time on that? Special import levy to be revised, VAT 17.5% to be revised?
Well, I think that the Ministry of Finance, I'm sure, has a work plan, an activity plan that would include that in terms of the calendar proposal for introducing that.
We're told by the minister that by the senior minister that you met in some form as economic management team to discuss this matter. Do you want to share with us what your common resolve was in respect of these matters?
Honorable Member, regrettably, I'm not sure to be prudent for me to do so.
Thank you. I'm holding in my hand here the Hansard of Parliament for 2005, when you were approved as Minister for Trade and Industry. And in it, there is a paragraph attributed to you, and I'm quoting, where you said, "The ministry has formulated a comprehensive and coherent national trade policy anchored on two pillars, an export-led industrialization strategy and a domestic market-led industrialization strategy." What did you leave behind this statement as a legacy as Minister for Trade and Industry?
First, I think we've talked about our industrial development initiatives that will satisfy the component of that statement, of that vision statement, that deals with enhancing domestic production. Within the same context, we also have talked about enhancing export generation activities. We've discussed the issue of cassava starch, but for garments and textiles, I'm sure members will recall that for the first time in the history of our country, we made significant improvements in terms of our exports to the U.S. market and then to other market destinations. So if we want to get into all the detailed activities undertaken by the ministry to fulfill that vision, it will take quite a bit of time.
Thank you very much. I also have with me the Hansard of December 2007 under the leadership of the New Patriotic Party government. Then, to be fair to you, you were not in that exact position. But should Ghanaians conceive of your one factory, one district song as a rehash of an old song that you want them to tune into, or a new one? And I'm quoting from that document in page paragraph 2835. This is the quote. And district industrialization program. Under this program, 20 selected districts will be allocated seed capital to support their industrial projects for which business plans have already been done. What's that done?
Honorable Minority Leader, I think that you started by saying that it wasn't to him, he did not specifically make the statement. So I don't think we want him to go into the arena of offering opinions on something that has been said by somebody else. So if you can rephrase the question.
I'm referring to a statement by a minister of the elsewhere MPP administration he was part, that 20 districts were selected to be piloted. I want to know the status. Who? Honorable Joe Beduansa, for the record.
But Honorable Minority Leader, let's be fair to the nominee. He, at the time, he wasn't the Minister for Trade. So, in his capacity as what then would he be speaking? So let's move on. Let's move on, Honorable Minority Leader.
So can I also say that if he speaks to this manifesto, since it's not attributable to his person, I should reject what he says? Please, no. We are assessing a member of government. Same government is pledging one district, one factory. Few years ago, same government promised that we want to be able to make a comparative analysis for the Ghanaian people, whether this 20 which was promised in 2007, by the time of the end of the tenure of the administration in 2008, was honored. If honored, then I can have confidence and trust that what I'm being promised today, I can have hope against it tomorrow. That is my simple question, and I stand by the question.
Do I take it that the question has been rephrased? Honorable nominee, if you can go on with the answering of the question.
Thank you, Honorable Chair. Honorable Minority Leader, just for clarity, can you just read that phrase? Because even though I was not personally responsible at that time, because of the groundwork that has been done, I am aware that a number of district enterprise might have been established by that, on the basis of which that statement was made. I want to be sure I heard you right.
In fact, you have assisted me, because this was part of the economic policy statement that late Bawuredu presented on behalf of His Excellency President Akufo. And to quote the paragraph, Outlook for 2008, District Industrialization Program, and I quote, under this program, 20 selected districts will be allocated seed capital to support their industrial projects for which business plans have already been completed. A district project will be established. I want to know whether this was done per the budget pledge, so that I can trust this manifesto pledge I'm seeing.
subject to, Mr. Chairman, honorable member.
Please go ahead.
Subject to very specific details, I can say to this committee that the basis on which that number was used would have been the district assemblies that had already paid monies into their accounts to support the district enterprises for which business plans had been prepared. And what I recall was that they were in the process of getting the private sector to make their contributions to those companies to allow them to take off. So I know for sure that there were district assemblies that had set up project accounts. When we say government contribution, it is either directly from consolidated fund or contributions from the district assemblies. I'm aware that some district assemblies had made allocations.
Thank you. So, nominee, do I take it that you won't know whether these 20 district projects were established or not?
To make any specific reference to numbers.
I'm referring to policy statement in 2007 where this 20, if there are 20 district factories, we will know, and the people of Ghana will know. I am convinced that it was not done, but I just want to appreciate, it's not directed at your person, but just to appreciate that government sometimes makes promises that for other reasons is unable to honor. Perfect. So one factory, one district. Was it done, honorable nominee? Was it done?
Honorable member, I've already given an indication that I cannot give you, honorable member, I cannot give you the specific details, but what I can say for sure, that for example, the Palubu tomato factory, the support that was provided was within the context that it qualified to be a district enterprise. So that clearly is one example. And I know that Japan Textiles was also giving some support. They were all classified as district enterprise at that time. I could go on and on. So I cannot speak to the 20, but definitely if we audit the numbers, I have absolutely no doubt that they knew what they were talking about.
Thank you, honorable nominee. I have known and worked with you. I was in Ethiopia with you on Agua, and I know you are very bold and courageous when it comes to your convictions. This time you were then in the seat as minister. Today we have heard from President Nana Akufo-Addo about a ministry for business development, which for our purposes signals an increase in the size of government, but our potential worry is on role conflict. Now, in 2007, business development was part of your institutional reforms as part of the budget. So I refer you again to paragraph 519, business development, where the focus, you define what business development will do. Would you be bold to stand that this business development ought to be under the Ministry of Trade and Industry and not on its own?
Mr. Chairman, my understanding...
Sorry. Honourable member, please. Your mic, please. Please, ask another question. You're asking an opinion which our rules frown upon, please.
Business development, as you define it, bordered on private sector development. What will you do differently as Minister from Trade and Industry on private sector from the Ministry for Business Development?
Mr. Chairman, an honorable member, I made an allusion to the fact that my understanding of the new configuration of ministerial appointments is that His Excellency the President has identified certain strategic undertakings that he's committed to. One of them is supporting private sector development. And in that regard, he has nominated for your consideration a minister who would support him in undertaking his responsibility for providing oversight. Number two, provide the liaison between the line ministry and then the office of the president. Because just to give the benefit of doubt to the president, I'm not sure that the president would expect that one individual with support staff can undertake the task that is assigned to a whole ministry. And so, Honorable Minister, if you recall, the 6 components of what I described as our transformation agenda included business development and investment. And so we are going to work together with the Office of the President to ensure that his vision is realized. But the line sector ministerial responsibility for business development still remains with the Ministry of Trade and Development. And so I'm not sure that there's any confusion. We will work together with the minister to ensure that the business development agenda of his president is realized.
Thank you, Honorable Nominee. I note that at the time, your understanding of business development, and I'm paraphrasing again from the Hansard, was to facilitate the development of business support services targeted especially at the informal sector. Now, if you listen, as we did to President Nana Akufo-Addo, of promoting businesses, and he hinted, if you want, I'll give you his exact quote. President Nana Akufo-Addo said, the development of businesses is central feature of this particular minister he's bringing in. So, do you conceive of a conflict? Because you largely, as Minister for Trade and Industry, will be responsible for the promotion of businesses. Or is this the business development that you anticipated in 2005, which will deal with the informal sector?
My understanding is that, Honorable Chair and Honorable Member, my understanding is that in supporting the ministry to report to the president on the execution of our responsibilities, it's a valid statement to make that he will be engaged in that, because he's supporting the line ministry in addressing and dealing with that.
Honorable Nominee, do you anticipate a conflict or not?
I do not anticipate a conflict.
Thank you. Thank you. May I now take you to Honorable Anthony Cabo left off with sugar and the development of sugar. You are well aware, based on research findings that you probably have read together with all of us, about the increase in import bill for sugar. And you are aware of the initiative of Commander Sugar at whatever state it is. And for the record, there is 24.5 million Indian credit facility approved for the outgrower farmers and irrigation development. What sugar needs is land, water, and sunshine. And Ghana is credited with all that. The sugar industry can employ 10 to 20,000. Will you give us your word to implement the development of a sugar estate as part of your quest to reduce the ever-growing sugar import bill, taking into particular the Dipale Savulugu program that the Honorable Cabo referred to?
I can make that commitment because it's an integral part for making the factory viable.
You were very instrumental in AGUA and subsequent to its renewal. Can you give us practical steps you will take to increase Ghana's taking advantage of AGUA in its trade relations with the United States?
Thank you, Honorable Member. First, there has to be clarity about the products that have the potential to compete on the U.S. market, because there are 6,400 products that we could export under AGOA. So I think the starting point for us is to become clear about what is it that competitively we can produce and export. The second is to agree on a program of support, a comprehensive program of support to assist companies that qualify to participate in this particular program. So that would include technical assistance in identifying expertise, managerial and technical. It would include facilitating access to financing, and then also helping them to identify potential buyers. The third component will be to facilitate, once the production actually takes place, is to facilitate the transit of these goods through our exports. Because, Honorable Member, as you know, having been in this position, it's not just producing the items, but how to be able to export them at the right time to the destination. So, off the cuff, these are three things which I think will be important to help us take advantage of AGOA.
Honorable Minister, I'm aware that you took policy briefs and other briefs from the transition team. Are you aware that you'll be inheriting a Ministry of Trade and Industry not akin to what you left behind?
Mr. Chairman, we've not completed the process of transition, and then so I'm not in a position to make that clarification.
I'll be surprised if Ayekoo and Co have not been helpful and supportive. For instance, trade facilitation is a core function of the Ministry of Trade and Industry. You now have the single window intervention, which is aimed at improving the ease of doing business and cost of clearance at the port, now under the Ministry of Finance. As Principal Legal Advisor to President Nana Addo on Trade and Industry, what would be your advice on this matter?
Mr. Chairman and Honorable Member, the responsibility for trade facilitation clearly lies in the bosom of the Ministry of Trade and Industry, but it also has implications for revenue generation. And from what you've said, the responsibility for trade facilitation now has been located in the Ministry of Finance. My understanding is that we'll work closely with the Ministry of Finance and then ensure that each ministry will take care of what component is required to make trade facilitation viable. For example, if it has to deal with actually supporting entrepreneurs through the port processes, then that becomes our responsibility. There's a revenue generation component that the Ministry of Finance is responsible for. So they may also then take responsibility. So it's a question of intersectoral collaboration, which I thought I had addressed earlier on. That on my part, the way I see it is that we should not look at the structures or the positions that have been more or less introduced, but look at progressively how we can work together to achieve the collective objectives of the government.
Thank you. I'm not inviting you to a turf war, but you've been signature and a major participant at WTO. Trade facilitation does not come under finance. Would you take an appropriate decision on this matter?
Honorable Member, just to seek clarification, when you say take appropriate decision on the matter, what are you suggesting?
Throughout the world, trade facilitation is the mandate of the Minister of Trade and Industry. And I believe you were part of even the Geneva processes where you answered questions, not the Minister of Finance, on behalf of Ghana as to country concerns in getting this improved. The single window currently operates under the Ministry of Finance. GCNet have deployed countrywide business and trade processes that needs an interface with a single window facility. What will you do to reconcile the two working effectively and playing your role as a lead person on trade facilitation?
Honourable Member, you're absolutely right. In compliance with the WTO regulations, I intend still to ensure that my ministry has responsibility for ensuring that the trade facilitation agenda is effectively prosecuted. But I'll work collaboratively with the Ministry of Finance to ensure that they support us in undertaking that responsibility.
Are you also aware that IDIF, which used to be the baby for supporting other industries and the growth of small and medium enterprises, which constitute about 90% of GDP, is now under the Ministry of Finance by legislation by virtue of the Ghana Exim Bank? How do you intend to support the private sector with the transformed IDIF, now Ghana Exim Bank?
Honourable Member, I recognize that the conventional practice in many matured economies is that the Exim facilities have a direct reporting relationship to the Ministry of Trade and Industry. So I agree with what you are saying. However, the legislation now has allocated oversight responsibility to the Ministry of Finance already. So to enable us move on and operationalize it, I'll work together with the Ministry of Finance to ensure that the Exim Bank facility, as before, is used to support private sector development as reflected in our transformation agenda.
Honourable Member, you are aware that the previous government initiated the stimulus package which targeted a number of industries, including members of the AGI, in order to improve their competitiveness, improve their access to credit with some financial stimulus packages. How would you be able to do that today as Minister for Trade, given this constraint?
Honourable Member, just to understand the last bit of your question, how would I be able to do this with which constraint?
It was easier for you to request IDIF to give support to particular identified industries that were in distress. Now you have a Ghana Exim which is largely looking at export financing and export trade. And you know that to grow the Ghanaian private sector, your primary focus, subject to your rejection, will be SMEs, small and medium enterprises. On what facility would you be able to give out the support to the Ghanaian private sector?
Thank you, Honourable Member. Mr. Chair, my understanding is that even though the institutional reporting might have been located with the Ministry of Finance for whatever reason, operationally, I hope that I'll be able to work collaboratively with the Ministry of Finance to ensure that the Exim Bank lives up to its mandate of supporting private sector development, in which case the location of oversight responsibility under the Ministry of Finance may not necessarily jeopardize our efforts to use the fund to support our industrial development. In addition, we've also proposed the establishment of an industrial development fund, which would complement the Exim Bank facility.
How do you intend to get money to finance the Industrial Development Fund?
We are working together with the Ministry of Finance to identify the different sources of financing to support this fund. But be that as it may, I can share this, that first, just as was done under the Infrastructure Development Fund, there will be a contribution from the Consolidated Fund. Secondly, because this is going to support industrial development, and which by logical extension is commercial activity, within the context of what the Ministry of Finance will be doing in terms of borrowing, we will be able to set up a fund into which private sector capital could be channeled to support the industrial development.
Nominee, you are aware, per some of your handing over news then subsequent to the Honorable Kwame Battles, that the minimum requirement for this industrial development fund will be $600 million US. Where would you get this from?
Mr. Minister, I'm not sure that reference to 600 million, because we have not put any figure on that. It's a different thing we're talking about. But we'll cross the bridge when we come to that.
In your answer to one of the earlier questions, you sought to state that the 1 million that would be given to each constituency, part of it would be used to finance one factory, one district. How do you intend to raise that $275 million US this year and for other years?
I think this has, I hope, been clarified by the Minister of Finance. But if not, I can say, for example, that the allocation, the capital budget allocation for the budget has 275 million already allocated for capital expenditure, and my understanding is that is going to be that they are going to use $275 million out of the capital budget, which is about 1.2 billion dollars for the purposes of that fund.
Under the Presidential Special Initiative that you supervise as Minister for Trade and Industry, very dear to your heart was the development of the apparel and textiles industry. Given some hindsight today, would you do things differently to support the apparel and textile industries, which hitherto, for instance, had an employment of 75,000, now struggling for about only 3,500, including Japan textiles and others? What will you do differently for apparel and textile industry?
Honorable Chair and Honorable Member, we'll continue with the program as was designed. My understanding is that the difference between the figures that you quoted in respect of when we were in charge and then the 3,500 is because of the lack of attention that was paid to the sector. So we introduced the initiative. We believe in that. So we'll make sure that we continue with the program as formulated and even deepen our intervention in that regard.
Thank you. It may interest you that only one or two of them, notwithstanding the enormous investment that was made in them, is surviving. So what will you do differently to sustain apparel and textile businesses?
Honorable Chairman, Honorable Member, as I said, my understanding is that the kind of support that was required to make the companies survive, that support was not provided. So all we are saying is that now that we have a chance to go back and continue from where we started off, we'll make sure that we'll do that and even do it more.
May I now, Honorable Alan John Tremantin, bring your attention to Economic Partnership Agreement. As a country, we have adopted our position. There is a common ECOWAS position, which probably is not exciting to Big Brother Nigeria because of the huge volumes of oil exports. What will you do to bring closure to Ghana having a dedicated EPA, together with your the President's colleagues at the ECOWAS level with the European Union on EPA?
Honorable Member, I think this will be a joint effort between the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the Office of the President, and the Ministry of Trade and Industry. Obviously, our brothers in Nigeria have to live up to their obligations and under the ECOWAS protocols. And so my understanding is that now that we are negotiating as a regional bloc with the European Union, that Ghana is committed to the EPAs. It's been, Parliament has passed and ratified this. We would encourage our brothers in Nigeria, because we were negotiating as an economic bloc, also to be able to do what is necessary to enable all of us come together as a regional bloc to be able to complete the process. Because whilst there are disadvantages and negatives about the EPAs, we also know that it provides some advantages which we can harvest if we take the EPAs seriously.
Should Nigeria fail to honor, what will you do as principal advisor to the president on this matter to take on Ghana having a position on the EPA with the European Union?
Honorable member, I would advise that the president continues to use quiet diplomacy to ensure that Nigeria also becomes part of the negotiating bloc. Because, ECOWAS without Nigeria clearly will not be strong enough to face the EPA, the European market, as a regional bloc.
So can I, by extension, say EPA without Nigeria, you are not likely to approve of it or support it?
Honourable member, the very architecture of the EPAs suggests that if we are unable to sign as a regional bloc, then the fundamentals for negotiating the agreement would have been destroyed. Because that's what the whole essence of the EPAs, that we have regional blocs that are now negotiating with the European Union instead of individual countries. But they allowed provisions that would enable us in the interim, whilst the regional bloc negotiates to work together, for us to continue to trade. But the moment it becomes obvious that Nigeria is unwilling and unable to sign up to the agreement, then obviously the construct is frustrated. And in that respect, we as a country, individually and jointly with other ECOWAS members, will now have to think about new trading arrangements with the European Union. Because as Honourable Member, you would appreciate, there has to be some form of trade arrangement between the EU and individual countries. So if it does not work as EPAS, there has to be an alternative. And at that point, we'll cross the bridge when we get there.
Honorable Nominee Minister for Trade and Industry, the EPA will border on a critical issue of market access. So whilst you are unable to control the EU markets, Ghanaian businesses, particularly exporters to the EU market, are being denied market access. What agency with timelines will you give to this obligation? By which time should Ghanaian businesses, especially exporters, expect that Ghana would have, together with our ECOWAS partners, concluded an arrangement that will give them market access to the EU market? Because your border is here, you may be able to do the zero thing. What will happen? Can we have your position on that?
My understanding is that if we are unable to negotiate as a bloc, then obviously what we are talking about does not arise. But in the interim, each country, including Ghana, has to have its own internal arrangements to enhance the capacity of our manufacturers to take advantage of the EPAs. Currently, as the agreement is configured, the EU provides 100% access to its market for Ghana, for example. And then we are providing 75% access to the European market. So the underlying question is, are we going to be able to transform our industrial base to be able to support our exports agenda too? And that is the basis for what we've been talking about the last couple of hours.
Thank you, Chairman. Honor, may I request that you were in Ethiopia and you have some understanding the extent to which the Ethiopian government has taken advantage of AGOA in deepening their trade and bilateral ties with the U.S. What practical steps will you take for Ghana to take advantage of AGOA and to expand its exports to the United States?
Honorable Member, I had the privilege and opportunity to advise the Ethiopian government on the agenda for AGOA. Basically, some of the interventions that I helped them to undertake, it's also reflected in the kind of initiatives that I've been talking about. So if I've been able to help Ethiopia to get started, I'm sure that we can do it better in Ghana.
I'm about ending, Chairman. The free zones concept has largely become an Accra phenomena, largely within the industrial hub of the Greater Accra region. Would you want to replicate the free zones and other industrial parks in every other region of Ghana?
Thank you, Honorable Chair. Honorable Member, this is at the center of the transformation agenda we've been talking about. Part of our challenge going forward is to make sure that we introduce an industrial development park in each of the 10 regions. So we already have the free zone in Accra. You recall that we initiated the process to establish one in the secondary Takoradi area. There's one in Buankra, adjoining the Freeport in Ashanti region. And we've made a commitment in our manifesto that we would ensure that each region has an industrial park. So it's a major part of our transformation agenda.
What plans will you have for small and medium enterprises in Ghana?
We've indicated, and in response to a previous question, that we'll be looking at the existing institutions that have responsibility for supporting small and medium-sized businesses, including the MBSSI, Gratis, the REP project. We'll be doing an institutional audit to understand whether or not, as they exist, they are capable of optimizing the support that we are looking at. If it requires some consolidation, we'll be able to make that determination. I think that's the first major institutional exercise that will be undertaken. Secondly, all the policy interventions, either tax reform or business regulation that we've talked about, will all be part of the support that will be given to small and medium enterprises. And of course, any other thing that would also emerge from our consultations with the private sector.
In your earlier introduction, as you were profiling and referencing the MPP manifesto on employment and industry, you indicated as at an issue of expanded exports. What will you do within which period to expand exports, particularly dealing with the vexed issue of standardization?
Honourable Member, currently we have a national export development strategy. Unfortunately, it has not been accompanied by a comprehensive blueprint for operationalizing the strategy. So the first thing that we will do is to develop an action plan to support the strategy. At this stage, I'm not sure it's advisable for me to go into details as to what we intend to do. But I think suffice it to say that what we need to support our export agenda is to have an operational plan that will accompany the strategy as it is now.
Thank you. I heard you talk about collaboration with the Ministry of Food and Agriculture, and I'm particularly interested at two issues. You are familiar with the work of an entity like Blue Skies, which does pineapple process exports to the UK and other markets. Would you be able to develop and inspire Ghanaian interest in doing same, and how do you intend to do that?
Very much so, Honorable Member. I think maybe with your experience in the ministry, you probably remember where they started from and where they are now. This is exactly a reflection of what we're talking about, even with the one district, one factory. I mean, that Blue Skies is a typical one district, one factory initiative. And so, I mean, I'm talking about existing. I mean, they may not qualify because they are overcapitalized. But this is the kind of thing we want to replicate all over Ghana. And looking at the fact that they started from Ghana and they are now in Brazil, in South Africa, in other countries, it shows that the system in Ghana, if we are serious, can work.
Chairman, finally, on buffer stock, you would notice, as my colleague raised it earlier, that the bane of many Ghanaian farmer is access to market after the season, and the state had instituted the buffer stock to assist, so that, for instance, if the UN needed food in Mali or in Gambia, you could rely on what the buffer stock buys from Ghanaian farmers. Will you resurrect and finance effectively the buffer stock agency?
Honorable Member, I'm not sure the state of the buffer stock company, but if it's collapsed, I think we would commit to revive it. But Honorable Member, the key to dealing with bumper stocks is not just setting up one agency. Part of it is also industrializing our agriculture, which is the whole basis for our industrial transformation agenda. Once we are able to do what we are committing to do, the issue of buffer stocks will probably become a moot point.
You have GIHOC, which is one of the institutions under the Ministry of Trade and Industry. You have Ayensu Starch Factory, which is under you, that you demonstrated that Guineas have demonstrated interest in co-partnering the ownership of it. The Ghanaian businessman doing Casapreco and his like, is it government business to do business?
It is government's business to support business, and basically that's what we are committing to do. And so you recognize that in the case of Ayensu and those others that you may be referring to, government took the initiative to incubate these interventions with a view to bringing in private sector participation based on the nature of that particular industry. So government, at least our government, will work collaboratively with the private sector in supporting industrial development.
There are young Ghanaian businesses, particularly graduates from the universities, who are only looking up to 50 to 100,000 business plan in order to be able to support a business initiative of sustaining their own life. What kind of package will you have for that category of Ghanaian young businesses?
Thank you, Honorable Member. Part of it will be for us to recapitalize and refocus the Maslock program to support startups, as you are referring to. because they are looking for much smaller amounts of capital, and then obviously also to help them access other funding that will be made available through the various interventions that we are talking about.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honorable Member.
Thank you. Because of the length that the minority leader has used, I've reserved my own questions. You're out of order. Thank you, Honorable Nominee, for attending on the commission. At this point, if there are any persons to be introduced, yes, the Chief Whip will introduce them and then we'll start.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We wish to acknowledge the following personalities who accompanied the nominee here. Mrs. Patricia Christabel Chematin, the spouse of the nominee. Mr. Baika, Chief Director, Ministry of Trade and Industry. Mr. Robert Ahomkan Lindsay, Policy Advisor, MPP 2016 campaign. Mr. Steve Chematin, former High Commissioner to Malaysia. Mr. Osei Kofuo is also here. Mr. Ernest Ejapon, a director in the Ministry of Trade and Industry. Mr. Osei Bunsu Patak, a member of the New Patriotic Party. Okay. Mrs. Butter, I'm on the 8th. Mrs. Barbara Benisa. Mr. Sandy Osei-Ajimai, CEO, Slade Industries. And finally, Honorable Hakman Owusu-Ajiman. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Honorable Nominee. You will hear from us. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Chairman and Honorable Members, for the opportunity.
Honorable members, if we continue the way we're going, we'll be doing 16 hours. Oh yeah, I still want to say it here. We'll have 16 hours, 4 hours per candidate, so we should count. Please swear in the nominee, Honorable Ayekoo, please.
I, Shirley Ayekoo,
Swear by Almighty God
swear by Almighty God
that the evidence I shall give before this committee
that the evidence I shall give before this committee
touching the matter in issue
shall be the truth,
the whole truth,
the whole truth,
and nothing but the truth.
So help me God.
So help me God.
Honorable Shirley Ayekoo, congratulations on your nomination to the ministerial position of Minister for Foreign Affairs. Kindly tell us a little about yourself, as briefly as possible.
Thank you very much, Honorable Chairman. Honorable Chairman, my name is Shirley Ayekoo. I am 53 years old. Next month I'll be 54. I have 2 children, married. I've been in Parliament. This is my 13th year, 4th term as a parliamentarian. My hobbies, I like to cook, I like to read, I like to travel. That's about it, Honorable Chairman.
Cannot be about it. Tell us where you went to school and what you have done before coming to Parliament.
Thank you. I went to primary school at New Hope Preparatory School, secondary education at Akufo-Addo International School for my O-level, and then I proceeded to St. Mary's Secondary School for my advanced level. From there, I did a course in secretarial and management studies at Pittman Central College. I also, then I did a few years down the line, I came to Ghana Institute of Journalism to do public relations and advertising. Few years after that, I went to the University of Westminster to do a master's in public communications. And then I went to the University of Ghana Business School as well to do an EMBA in project management. Well, yeah, in the project management option. In between, I have worked in various organizations. In admin, I have also worked. I've owned my own company, Dynacom, for about 4 or 5 years. Whilst I was at Dynacom, I did some consultancy for the Ministry of Tourism and Modernization of the capital city. And then I came to Parliament. I've worked at Wealth Space, Ghana, first in admin and then as marketing manager. I've also worked at the Diversity Implementation Committee as PA to the Executive Secretary. In short, this is what I've done. I've also done a number of short courses, and I've also done a number of short courses, including ADR, Alternative Dispute Resolution, and also short courses at Harvard, short courses in marketing management at GIMPA. I don't know whether I've left anything else out, Honorable Chairman.
Are you ever a Minister of State or Deputy Minister of State?
I've left that out. Yes, in 2005, I was appointed into the President Kufuor's administration as Deputy Minister, first at the Ministry of Information for about a year. Then I was transferred or appointed to the Ministry of Trade. Ministry of Foreign Affairs for over a year. And then from Foreign Affairs, I went to Ministry of Trade. And then from Ministry of Trade, I was brought back to Ministry of Foreign Affairs before we left power on the midnight of the 6th of January 2009. Thank you.
Have you also served on any parliament outside Ghana? Have you been a member of any parliament outside the Ghana parliament?
Yes, Mr. Honorable Chairman. Thank you for prompting me. Yes, I've been since April 2013. I've been a member of the ECOWAS Parliament. And at the ECOWAS Parliament, I was vice chair for NEPAD and APRM. I've also been on committees during my 12 years in Parliament. I've been on the Defense and Interior Committee as a member. I've also been on the Gender Committee. I've also been on the Communications Committee. And I've been ranking member for 4 years on the Foreign Affairs Committee. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and congratulations, Honorable Nominee. I will take you through your CV very quickly. Page 1, you will notice that the spelling of Boche, the communication we have from His Excellency the President, Boche is spelled with an A. Your CV has an E. For our records, how do we spell Boche for our records?
Thank you, Honorable Chairman. For the records, my name is Boche with an E, not A. This mistake has followed me throughout most of my public life because the normal spelling for Boche is A, so people take it for granted that that is the spelling, but mine is with an E.
Thank you very much. Still on page 1, you have left out your residential address. We will ask that you give that to us, but not openly. Give that to us later. Your personal profile, we need your permission to amend a former member of parliament for the Wager constituency from 2005 to 2013 and not 2012. A few typos with deputy minister, and we'll have your permission to amend that. But we also noticed that you do not indicate if you ever carried out national service. If you ever carried out national service. You are silent on national service. Did you carry out national service in line with Act 426, the National Service Act 1980?
No, Honorable Speaker, I did not do national service. At the time I did my A-level, it was usually after the A-level. But that law came into force a year after, so I didn't have to do national service.
So which year exactly did you finish your A-levels? Because on your CV, your A-levels is 1980 to 1982. So I assume that you did complete your A-levels after the act had been passed.
Honorable Chairman, I quite remember that at the time I was happy that the law had come into force and it didn't affect our batch. I did finish in 1982. I remember that clearly because a cousin of mine, he was caught by the law.
Thank you for that. Page 2, we'll need your permission to have you supply us information on your basic education. You have talked about that, so please, when you carry out the corrections, please amend accordingly. We need your permission to also correct communications, the MA in public communications. Then you do not also tell us where you carried out these programs. Institute of Paralegal Training and Leadership Studies, can we know where it's located? The African Leadership Initiative as well. Can you please indicate to this committee where we can find these institutions?
Thank you very much, Honorable Chairman. The Institute of Paralegal Training and Leadership Studies, the course was at North Jowulu, at the Institute at North Jowulu, and it was a number of us from Parliament did that course. Also, the African Leadership Initiative was over a 2-year period where they handpick a number of people from different walks of life and then take them through 6-monthly training. So every 6 months you go for some training. Some was done, there was one was done in Lagos, one was done here in Akosombo, the other one was done in Aspen, Colorado. Thank you.
Please come with me to page 3 of your CV under work experience. We need your permission to amend Member of Parliament 4th term, but you write January 2005 to date. So we need to amend that to 4 terms instead of 4th term. Are you okay with that?
Yes, I'm okay with that, Honorable Chairman, and I apologize to the committee. These are little mistakes that shouldn't have happened.
Still on page 3, we want to know, but before then, Ministry of Tourism and Modernization. I assume that it was modernization of the capital city, so kindly take note of that as well. But a more substantive issue has to do with your engagement as a communications consultant at the Ministry of Tourism and Modernization of the capital city. We want to know, since in 2003 you were a member of Parliament, we want to know if you applied to the Office of Profit to be permitted to carry out that consultancy service.
Thank you, Honorable Chairman. Honorable Chairman, I became Member of Parliament on 7th January 2005. Thank you.
Sorry about that. On the last page, you have told us verbally your hobbies, but you did omit that. So we will ask that when you resubmit the CV, please take note of that. Mr. Chairman, that will be all for now.
Chairman, let me also congratulate the Honorable Shirley Ayekoo, and to take her back to page 1 of her CV, the very last paragraph holds a master's degree, public relations. If you will indulge us to do it right, so that for each of them we dedicate the year, like you say, master degree in business administration, then we attribute it to a date. No, it doesn't help the reading if I just take it and say MBA on that page. I don't see what the problem would be if we have, for instance, when you come to page 2, courses, when you say December, what do you imply? Was it 1st December to 30th December? you come and you say August 2014. Is it 1st August? It probably may be just a 14-day program, a 2-week program. So please, for emphasis, the assumption is that this has been submitted to us under oath, and therefore we should avoid possible things that may be held against a nominee not with good intentions. So if that can be improved upon, I think we should allow that. Page 3 again, in her attempt to define herself, Member of Parliament, 4th term, which the Honorable Ablakwa, Member of Parliament, 3rd term, Member of Parliament, 2nd term. No need. She is 4 terms standing as Member of Parliament. It's enough. That this is her 4th term as Member of Parliament will be enough communication to Parliament, instead of trying to designate it as 1st, 2nd, 3rd, and 4th term. And then committees serve together with the ranking.
Honorable ranking member, I think that the 3rd term, 2nd term relates to the committees served during those periods, but probably can be made neater so that.
So, do we have your permission to make it neater?
Yes, Honorable Chairman.
Okay, thank you. So just take note of that, and I'm sure
I have
we can improve upon those. Congratulations. For instance, Chairman, I'm back again. Deputy Minister for Foreign Affairs, Deputy Minister for Information, Deputy Minister for Trade and Industry. Ideally, for elegance, each of them should stand alone, indicating the period in which she played that role. If you read the first page, that is the impression you should be carrying away of her background. Thank you.
Now we'll proceed to the substantive matters. I'll start from Asha, member for Cape Coast. North or South? North, right.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Congratulations, Honorable Shelley Ayekoo. I have 3 questions. Looking at your CV, you have a lot of rich experience to come to bear in this new ministry. How would you use your office to help in securing and encouraging foreign investors into this country?
Thank you very much, Honorable Chairman. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs, like most ministries of foreign affairs in the world, have shifted focus to what is called economic diplomacy. And economic diplomacy, apart from the normal diplomacy that we all know about, has to do with training foreign service officers to ensure that our foreign policy has a direct linkage to the country's economic development. And in doing so, the focus is on trade, on attracting foreign direct investment, and also attracting and boosting tourism. So I would ensure that most or all foreign service officers who are posted outside this country are well trained to be able to carry out this important policy initiative of ours. Our focus has changed. Economic diplomacy is a major plank of our foreign policy, and therefore training and ensuring that that becomes the focus of each mission outside the country will help in ensuring that we attract foreign direct investment, and also help in marketing our non-traditional exports or commodities outside the country. So training is important. We are fortunate to have a subvented agency under the Foreign Ministry, which is LESIAD, the Legon Center for International Affairs and Diplomacy. And it runs courses, so we will need to sit down with them and find out how they can help in terms of running short courses for Foreign Service officers. I believe that the Ministry of Foreign Affairs has an important role to play in that it would soften the ground, make the initial moves for other ministries to benefit from it, ministries such as the Ministry of Trade and other ministries that have something to do with investment, and of course the GIPC. Thank you.
Thank you very much. There has been an increase in incidents of abuse in all forms against some Ghanaians living outside. What practical steps will your ministry or will you take to ensure the safety of Ghanaians living outside?
Thank you, Honorable Chairman. This is a very unfortunate and very disturbing phenomenon. You would find that our compatriots leave the shores of this country to go outside in search of greener pastures. They are lured by all kinds of agencies. And then they take them to countries where they are maltreated, where whatever agreements that they may have signed with the agents are not adhered to, and as a result, they are abused. And in most cases, these are women. It is worrying, but I believe that we should be careful. We should sensitize people that they should be careful not to fall into the trap of these unscrupulous agents. Secondly, I believe that our ministry would work with the Ministry of Interior, especially because Ghana immigration is under the Ministry of Interior. So we need to work together. When you find a group of people leaving, you should be able to, as an immigration officer, to question them, interrogate them as to where they are going and all of that. And also, we need to work together with the Ministry of Employment. Some of these agencies are licensed, some are not, and we need to crack down to ensure that these agencies, these so-called employment agencies, we look into their background before we allow them to do anything. But I think that more importantly, we should sensitize Ghanaians that there is nothing like greener pastures outside. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable. Reading the NPP manifesto, page 45, it says the NPP will task our diplomatic missions to link our businessmen with foreign counterparts. I just want to end here. How would you include businessmen and women outside the capital? Because it looks like the focus is on businessmen in the capital. How do we extend it to the other regions, especially to the rural areas? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Chairman. This is a difficult question for me because it's not within the remit of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. But I must say that in linking businessmen, local businessmen with local businessmen outside, I think it's important that we don't just look within the capitals, but look outside the capitals into the rural areas. Because when you take agriculture, for instance, and you're linking a local business farmer, a businessman, to somebody outside in terms of export of his or her farm produce. You should be looking outside the capitals, because the real work or the real businesses are in the rural areas, and therefore we shouldn't look at what is happening in Accra only. Of course, when it comes to other businesses, you'll find them in Accra, but you find them throughout. So we must have some policy or program that will target probably a quota for each region and for each district. So that would be my answer to that.
Thank you very much, Honorable.
Honorable Suhuini. Sorry, am I pronouncing your name right?
Yes, you are. In fact, you are doing better than many people. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Honorable nominee, congratulations. Do we have a foreign policy, and what is it?
Yes, Honorable Chairman, we do have a foreign policy. Our foreign policy has changed over the period from when we gained independence to now. Our foreign policy started with Pan-Africanism as a focus during the times of Dr. Kwame Nkrumah. But what hasn't changed is the fact that as part of our foreign policy, we intend to be a good neighbor to the countries that surround us and any other country that so desires to have relations with us. We also are part of ECOWAS. We are part of the African Union. We are part of the United Nations and its agencies. So this is how it started. Along the line, foreign policy of this country has shifted focus from what we call normal diplomacy, good neighborliness, good relations, making sure that everything, the people, the countries around you, you're very chummy with them and all of that. What we have moved to is economic diplomacy, which I talked about a little earlier. And that is to ensure that in every relationship that Ghana engages in, that relationship should end in promoting and protecting the interest of Ghana, and also to ensure that it ends up in giving us positive dividends towards our development economically. So that is the thrust of our foreign policy right now. But in the MPP manifesto, we have decided that one area that we need to focus on is the area of our engagements with our multilateral agencies such as ECOWAS and also the African Union. ECOWAS, because we believe that with the industrialization that we intend to embark on, we should be able to trade within the region, that is West African region, and also within the continent. And therefore, our foreign policy is to make ECOWAS strong, is to make the African Union strong. And we should make our membership felt within these agencies. We should be able, as a country, as we have done in the past, to shape consensus within the ECOWAS region. Because if we are able to get things right and get ECOWAS to work very well, we have a ready market of 350 million. Right now, Ghana or West Africa, and by extension Africa, we do not trade amongst ourselves. We always look outside the continent to trade with Europe or with the Asian countries. I think it's about time that we start looking within, because there's so much potential, but we need to get things right.
I remember. Okay, you're done.
Chairman, I have a follow-up to Soyene's earlier. If the Honorable Ayekoo, are there aspects of the foreign policy that you may want to seek a revision to, and why?
Honorable Chairman, I don't quite get the question. That what aspects of the foreign policy will we seek a revision?
My understanding is that his first question was whether Ghana had a foreign policy. Having listened to you, I heard you want to trade.
Oh yes,
a trade promotion related foreign policy which focuses on it. So share with us which aspects of the foreign policy would you seek to improve by way of revision?
Thank you, Honorable Chairman. Yes, in the area of trade, in the area of foreign direct investment, in the area of ensuring that our country and our region is secure, in the area of making sure that as countries within our sub-region and the continent, peace and security issues are not out there where we have countries that are in crisis, because if the countries are in crisis, then it will be very difficult for us as a nation to achieve the aim.
Would you want to include terrorism on your list for revision?
Yes, Honorable Chairman. Terrorism, maritime security, we need to improve maritime security. We need to improve cyber security and areas such as that. We need to work and to ensure that all these areas are improved so that we're able to achieve our vision. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. From the answer, I see more of foreign relations instead of a foreign policy. At best, what I see is a regime policy over the years from the 60s, but maybe that is something you may want to look at as foreign minister, see whether we can have a national policy that we can call a Ghana foreign policy. But from the answers given, I see foreign relations or at best regime policy. But moving on, if you will indulge me, Mr. Chairman, I would like to go back to the nominee CV just for some clarification. I see that you write on page 2 that June 2008, you were a student at Harvard Kennedy School, Boston, USA, doing a course. That's June 2008. And I also see on page 4 that at the same time, or so it seems, you were Deputy Minister for Foreign Affairs and Deputy Minister for Trade and Industry. Now, were you a student, a foreign student for that matter, at the same time you were Deputy Minister for Trade and later Foreign Affairs? How did you attend lectures and all?
Thank you very much, Honorable Chairman. Honorable Chairman, this is a course that many members of Parliament have attended. It is a 10-day course. I was then at the Ministry of Trade, and I took my leave to attend that particular, to do the course. It was, yes, an executive program. Thank you.
All right. My final question. Now, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the new building that you'll be occupying, is of interest to me. And is of interest because of two government decisions. There was a government decision called the infilling scheme. Now, this infilling scheme led to abuse, where allocations of state lands in range cantonments and airport residential area were made through either protocol or bidding. Now, that piece of land was subject for In fact, it was allocated to people by one government. Another government came into power and confiscated the lands, and thanks to that confiscation and a Chinese grant, we have that magnificent building that houses our foreign affairs workers, which you will be occupying. Now, with the infilling scheme, I hate to say, but you are listed as one of the beneficiaries of that infilling scheme, not at that particular place.
If you may advert your mind to clause order 67 of our rules. This question is not admissible.
I haven't asked the question yet, Mr. Chairman.
But your premise is mentioning and then making personal characterization. So if you're going to ask a question, then you go straight to that. This characterization, and and I'll please advise that you apprise yourself of those conditions so that we don't keep coming back on interventions. Right?
Yes, so the question is this. As somebody who can be said to have been a beneficiary of the first decision of government, and a beneficiary today, if you are passed by the House, to be our foreign minister, where you will be working in that foreign ministry, how will these two decisions of different governments guide, the discharge of your duties in the best interest of the state?
Thank you, Honorable Chairman. I don't see any linkage between my benefiting from an infilling scheme and if this committee approves my nomination and also the House approves it, how it will affect my work in the foreign ministry. I don't see any linkage. Or the honorable member may want to draw the linkage for me. Thank you.
Honorable.
This is not fair.
Yes, Dominic.
Friendly fire. No, it's friendly fire, so don't worry. It's not really difficult. Let me congratulate the nominee. She has done herself a lot of good when I look at her academic achievement and her political achievement. Congratulations, Madam Nominee. The manifesto of the MPP emphasizes economic diplomacy, and I heard her say that under the foreign policy guide that she will be pursuing, and it's also clear that they will prioritize that particular section of the policy. What I want to find out from her is how she would be able to tap into the rich business culture of Ghanaians staying outside the country. How should we be able to link that with our people back home to enable us to take advantage of the people, Ghanaians who are staying there, and help this country achieve. After all, many countries, including Israel, were built by people who stayed in other countries. Not just the idea of foreign direct investment that she had already pre-mentioned, but I'm talking of how she will galvanize them, how she will organize them, how she will link them to enable us to take advantage of them than we are currently doing.
Thank you very much, Honorable Chairman. Honorable Chairman, I think I must say that the diaspora, Ghanaians who are living in the diaspora, whether they have just moved outside Ghana or they are second or third generation citizens of Ghana who live outside, or the youth, they are doing very well. Some of them are doing extremely well wherever they live. I'm told that you can find Ghanaians in 33 countries in the world, and some of them are captains of industry. I think it is important that we bring the expertise and the experience and the skills that they have acquired outside to help us in our development. There is always the need to link our youth, especially those who are engaged in startup businesses, to people who are already in the field and are doing it. It's important also to say that even as we look at the wider policy of engaging people who are prepared to come and help us as a country, we should specifically target our own people who are outside the country. They are doing well, and therefore they should come and also help us develop our country. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs started a unit called the Diaspora Unit, where they were collecting data on people of Ghanaian origin who live outside in these countries. Then at some point, they realized that this unit needed to be upgraded so that they will be able to do a comprehensive job of engaging the people in the diaspora. So it was expanded into a full bureau, which is a department at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. The Center for Migration Studies at the University of Ghana has done a lot of work on what they call the diaspora engagement policy, how to engage the people in the diaspora, for them to bring their experience to bear on what we do here. They are in the process of collecting data of who and who in each country and all of that. And also in their engagement with some of our compatriots, what they expressed, what do they get in return? And this is where in some of the meetings they mentioned that they would like to be part of the whole democratic process, which is for them also to vote during elections. So this brings into play the issue of ROPAL, which we passed many years ago, but it's not in force. So we are looking at ways in which it's at a very basic level right now. We are now going to build on that policy. The policy will go before Cabinet, and if, God willing, Cabinet approves it, then we will start some engagement with the people in the diaspora who can build this country for us. You have situations where doctors take some time off their annual leave and come into this country and render health services, operations, and surgeries for Ghanaians who so
I remember you're giving us enough information.
Thank
you. You are done. Honorable Kujeta Blanca, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. My first question will flow from where you just took off, our engagement with Ghanaians abroad. And this time I want us to narrow down on undocumented Ghanaians living abroad. We have seen that with the rise of nationalist parties in Europe, with the election of President Donald Trump, he has talked about an American first policy. He's been greeted with protests all over within the United States of America and outside. People are concerned about his immigration policies. Already, I do know that in October last year, 100 undocumented Ghanaians were deported back to Ghana. The German ambassador has also served notice that he will want to hold discussions with the Ghanaian government on this particular matter, knowing that immigration has become the biggest issue in Germany ahead of Germany's September 24 elections. I want to find out from you, what would be your strategy in the face of all of this, rise of right-wing nationalist parties and anti-immigration sentiments? How do we protect undocumented Ghanaians living in Europe and America? What would be your strategy for engaging them and regularizing them and ensuring that their rights are protected and that they are not deported in some of the circumstances that we are seeing, like happened in October last year?
Thank you, Honorable Chairman. Honorable Chairman, Honorable Member, you asked about my strategy and if we could regularize them. I think that would be difficult because the country has its laws, and members of the citizens of Ghana who have moved to other countries and have not been able to acquire either citizenship or residence there become illegal, and it will be very difficult for any mission outside the country to interfere in the affairs of that country to regularize them. But we also need to engage countries that we know or we have evidence of them treating such persons in an inhumane manner. We need to engage them and ensure that these people, when they are arrested, are treated well according to human rights of any person, so that they are brought back. I think what happens in some cases is that when they are arrested, some, in their efforts not to be brought down, will even say that, let's say if he or she is a Ghanaian, will say that I'm not a Ghanaian, I am stateless. So you don't know where to take the immigration officers, don't know where to take them, and as a result, they stay in detention for a very long time. And when that happens, it is difficult for the mission, the Ghana mission there, to intervene because the person says he or she is not a Ghanaian. So we need to look at these things, and also to sensitize Ghanaians that it is not bad. Things are not bad here. We are all here. You will find something to do, and therefore come back home. I think that is something that our missions can do. Meet with Ghanaians and appeal to them to come back home. And when a Ghanaian decides to come, we will facilitate by ensuring that if they don't have a travel document, we prepare a travel document for such a person. But I think it will be difficult to intervene in the affairs of a nation.
My concern was with the Ghanaians, how we engage with them and how we support them. We extend support services to them and guide them. And the latter part of your answer speaks to that. So I am okay with your response. My second question has to do with economic diplomacy. You have been quite heavy on that this morning. What will be your advice? A couple of weeks ago, we listened to Theresa May, the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, drawing the roadmap, putting out the roadmap for Brexit, the final exit of the United Kingdom out of the European Union. That has implications for trade with Ghana. We had and we still have the IEPA, the interim EPA, which this House has initialed, the European Union has ratified. But with Article 50 about to happen, as Theresa May indicated, it will mean that you need to renegotiate with Britain alone out of the EU. what advice will you be offering President Nana Akufo-Addo, and how do you intend to work with the Trade Ministry to ensure that at the end of the day, Ghanaian businesses are protected, especially when it comes to duty-free, when it comes to quota-free access to the British economy, and vice versa, since trade agreements are reciprocal? What will be your strategy in this regard?
Thank you, Honorable Chairman. Honorable Chairman, indeed, Brexit is on us, and whether we like it or not, it will have some effects on the relationship that we have with the UK. Like Honorable Member, you said, we would have to renegotiate our trade agreements outside of the negotiations that we did, where, because the UK was part of the European Union, it covered. We would have to renegotiate, but it would, whatever we renegotiate, I don't believe will put us in a worse situation. We've been a partner, a trading partner with the UK for a very long time. We go back a long way, and therefore, whatever we do, I believe that it will not put us in a worse situation. Neither will it be against the WTO rules. And therefore, yes, it will happen. What my worry, Honorable Chairman, is to do with the UK would have to also renegotiate trade agreements with bigger countries such as China, India, and the rest. And I hope that it will not adversely affect the agreements, because when you are negotiating with big countries, small countries such as ours, but we have ties of history, and therefore I don't believe that it will put us in a worse situation. My advice to the Trade Ministry will be that we should start engaging very quickly. I'm told that it will take about 2 years for them to exit after they've triggered the Article 50. And so we should start early so that we know the position, we know what exactly is the situation, and we start putting our stuff together early enough. So that would be my advice.
Mr. Chairman, my final question. The biggest issue currently, perhaps, within the corridors of the African Union has to do with Morocco's application to rejoin the African Union. We do know that last week an official visit had been scheduled with President Nana Akufo-Addo with the Moroccan king. A statement was issued a few days ago that visit has been postponed. It's clear to those of us who are watching the international relations space that Morocco continues to lobby. I want to know what will be your advice to the Ghanaian president on this bid by Morocco to rejoin the African Union. But remember that that bid is linked to the right of the Sahrawi Arab Democratic Republic to have their right to self-determination and to remain a member of the AU. Morocco would want to join the AU with the Sahrawi Republic being removed or losing its membership of the AU. I want to know, to what extent are you conversant with this matter, which is currently the most thorny issue within AU corridors, and what will be your advice to President Nana Akufo-Addo? Whose side are you on, Morocco or the Sahrawi Arab Democratic Republic?
I remember, please don't answer the question relating to sides. Just offer your advice.
Thank you, Honorable Chairman. Honorable Chairman, let me say that we in Ghana believe in the right of a people to self-determine where they want to be. It's been our policy for a very long time. Indeed, it is true that Morocco has applied to join the African Union, rejoin the African Union. Western Sahara is a member of the African Union. We do have relations with all countries. So we do have relations with Morocco. We do have relations with Western Sahara. They are, up to now, I haven't seen any document that is saying that Morocco wants Western Sahara taken out of the AU. And therefore, I really can't speak much to that. But they are coming. Their application has not yet been looked at by the African Union. I'm not even sure whether at the summit coming up it will be one of the issues that will be discussed. But let me say that Morocco is a friend, so is Western Sahara. It will be difficult at this point to take a stand as I sit here, because the issue of expelling Western Sahara from the African Union, I don't believe has come up.
All right.
Officially.
All right. Honorable Patricia.
Thank you, Honorable Chair. Congratulations, Honorable Shirley Ayekoo. Honorable, as a Foreign Minister designate, I'd like to ask you, what is your view and position on JITMO 2?
Honorable Chairman, this is a difficult, my view, my
hello?
personal view.
One moment, please. Is it on Gitmo 2? Sorry, the matter is sub judice, so I'll advise that you ask another question.
Thank you, thank you. Thank you, Honorable Chair. I'll go on to my second question. You agree with me that with reference to economic diplomacy, our missions will be the selling point and therefore should have a certain image. What is the current state of our missions after parliamentary approval for a US $50 million? I don't know if you have any idea. Parliament approved $50 million to ensure that we enhance our missions. Do you have any idea of our missions, the state of our missions? Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Chairman. Honorable Chairman, in the last 8 years, I have traveled and I have had occasion to visit some of our missions. I must say that most of our buildings are in very bad state. And so the 50 million Société Générale facility is very welcome. In some missions, we need to do rehabilitation. In other missions, we need to purchase a building because some of our buildings are rented, and as a result, we pay very high rent. And it would make business sense for us to purchase some of, whether it's the chancery or the residence. We need to do something immediately about it. Honorable Chairman, in some of the missions, or with regard to some of them, I think we would have to re-look at what we intended to do with that money. Because if you take in my opinion, if you take the New York building. It's in a very, very prime area, but it's in a very bad state. We have asbestos, which would make any public environmental body close down a building that has asbestos. But they've discovered asbestos there, which causes cancer. And then you take the heating system, it's almost gone. If we are to apply a paltry amount, as I have seen, which will be used for that, we won't be able to create what we would like to see. So I believe that in some cases we have to be radical and look at other options, whether it's a build, operate, and transfer option. You have a building in a prime area, you build it all the way to maybe 20, 30 floors. Whoever you go into the partnership with will rent the rest. You use whatever you need to use, and then after a while it is transferred to you. So we have the money, but I think we should re-examine the options available to us. Thank you.
Thank you. Honorable nominee, I know that our foreign missions, or let me state it this way, you are a member of the transitional team. The question I want to ask is, do you have a fair view of the conditions of service of our foreign officers, and if it needs some kind of enhancement? Thank you.
Honorable Chairman, until I become minister by the grace of God and through your approval and recommendation, I wouldn't know what the conditions of service is for foreign service officers. But I know that they always complain, so I'll look at it.
Honorable Hello.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. First, for pronouncing the name correctly. I'd also like to congratulate the Minister Designate for your nomination to this high office. I'm very, really happy about it. And we women are really happy and supportive of women being nominated. My first question really is about the acquisition of passports by our brothers and sisters living abroad. Recently, I had to come in to support students studying in Cuba who had difficulty in acquiring passports when the ones they took, they had expired. Can you give us what you think can be done so that they do not go through such hardships when they have to renew or even acquire new passports? Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Chairman. Honorable Chairman, the issue of passports I knew would come up. It's an issue that has become very controversial for several reasons. But let me say that we now, as a ministry, as a ministry, there are about 6 missions outside that issue passports. The example you gave, which is in Cuba, they do not issue passports. So what will happen is the people will go and fill the forms, and then it will be sent back here for the passports to be issued and sent back. What happens, which is why delays are caused, is that in some cases there are mistakes on the form, or some documents can't be authenticated, and as a result delays happen, because then they have to find ways of of contacting the applicant, correcting the mistakes. That takes time. And that is one of the reasons why you would find such delays in the issuance of passports. But let me say that
before you go on, if they did an online application, would that same problem persist?
Honorable Chairman, that is why the online application has been introduced. It cuts out a lot of the mistakes that you find in passports. Unfortunately, if I think I've got it right, in the mission, some of the missions, such as Cuba, they would still have to do a manual completion and send it to Ghana. But I stand for correction if that is not the case. But I think that is the case. We have about 6 missions where passports are issued, such as Abuja, UK, I believe New York and Washington, Berlin, and South Africa. But apart from those missions, any other mission would have to send and sometimes the diplomatic bags through which these things are sent. It takes time. There are delays with that as well.
Thank you. My second question really is about the appointments that we make when it comes to ambassadorial positions. It is our history that we sometimes put political figures, we appoint political figures, whereas the career diplomats also are qualified to serve as ambassadors. Would you suggest a quota, so that we have a win-win situation? I stand to get your view on this.
Thank you very much, Honorable Chairman. Honorable Chairman, the appointment of political ambassadors lies in the bosom of the President. I have some strong views on it, but I don't think that I am qualified to give those views. But yes, I think that.
I'm sorry to interject. You will be the President's principal legal advisor on foreign policy. We are not saying she should share it, but foreign policy, as foreign minister, the President will rely very heavily on the advice that you will give. So, do we expect advice sharing your heavy positions on this matter?
Honorable Chairman, in answering her question, I think that there must be a quota. Presidents all over the world, including those who have been presidents in this country and our president, will have and will always appoint political persons to the post of ambassador. What would happen is you might want a certain emphasis to be laid in a certain area which is very important to you, and therefore you send somebody who is not a career person to go. This is not to say that the career people are not capable.
Chairman, sorry, I'm back again. Honorable Minister nominee, there is a career division of the Foreign Service of men and women who have dedicated themselves to the pursuit of Ghana's foreign policy. On a 60-40 basis, 60 career, 40 political, or 80 career, 20 political, what would be your option, policy options?
Thank you, Honorable Chairman. I'm trying to be diplomatic, that's why. But, Honorable Chairman, in my opinion, it should be about 60-40, and also that in favor of the career diplomats, and also that we do not appoint political deputy ambassadors. Thank you. That's my opinion.
You are against deputy ambassadors at the missions?
No.
Political deputy ambassador. But the office of deputy ambassador, what will you do with head of chancellery?
We have the charges d'affaires in every mission, so they will act in the absence of the ambassador.
Last question, not too important, but I need to know. Well, to me, why? Do you think that? To me, I'm asking my question. Why are you interjecting? Hey, why?
Please, Honorable, address the chair. Ignore their sides,
please. She's been heckling me all the time. Do you think that in the era of economic diplomacy that you yourself have talked about a lot, do you think that Ghana should continue to be a member of the non-aligned nations?
I'm not, Honorable Chairman, I'm not even sure that it still exists. I'm sorry. But if it does, we've always been non-aligned. I mean, we don't take sides. So that's what I will say. If it exists, we should be part of it. Thank you.
Somebody said that it is alignment of those who are not aligned. That in itself is an alignment. Well, we'll come to leadership. Deputy Chairman.
Thank you, Chair. Congratulations, Minister Designates on Foreign Affairs, and also to place on record that she is one of my mothers in politics and a mentor as well. I want to start by asking, public procurement is an area where finances of the state could be saved or wasted. If you come to the European Union, they do have a directive on public procurements. As the minister designates on foreign affairs or for foreign affairs, would you advise that Ghana makes a strong case for the African Union or the ECOWAS to have a framework for all member states to draw their national procurement practices from, as the lessons are in the European Union?
This is a legal question. I am not a lawyer, but I will attempt to answer this.
Honorable nominee.
I believe the
Honorable nominee. I withdraw. I would want to avert your mind to Article 40 of the Constitution, which talks about international relations, and it reads, "In its dealings with other nations, the government shall promote and protect the interests of Ghana, seek the establishment of just and equitable international economic and social order, promote respect for international law, treaty obligations, and settlement of international disputes by peaceful means," and it reads on and on and on. In your view, would you say that is a foreign policy of Ghana? And would you add on, giving current international developments all over?
Thank you, Honorable Chairman. I believe Article 40 encapsulates the foreign policy of Ghana. Promoting and protecting the interest of Ghana whilst you deal with countries and institutions of the world. And also ensuring that we promote and respect treaties and other obligations and international law. I think by and large, we haven't done badly as a country. Also that, as I said earlier, we are strong as a country. We have played very leading roles in ECOWAS, in the AU. We've had our voices heard in the corridors of the UN. We have taken the chair of the UN Security Council again, and goes on and on and on. I think we haven't done badly, and by and large, that is our foreign policy.
Chairman, let me thank you for the opportunity and to congratulate the honorable colleague, Honorable Ayekoo. I worked with her representing President Mahama and she then President-elect Nana Addo Dankwa on the inauguration committee, and by all standards, I believe that this was one of our best inaugural ceremonies. But taking it from Honorable Ajua Safo, will you be guided by Article 40 in the pursuit of your foreign policy?
Yes, Honorable Chairman, I believe that our foreign policy, the base document for our foreign policy or any policy, is the supreme law of the land, which is the Constitution. So yes, I can see.
So when the Honorable Ajua was suggesting to you to add to it, remind her that you don't have the power to add to it. Add how?
So.
Please ask your next question.
Chairman, it leads me to my first and major question. Securing passport in Ghana is the headache of many Ghanaian citizens across the country, from Hamili in the Upper West region, Kukobla in the northern region, through Zwarungu in the Upper East region, and Buedi in the western region. Can you assure this House and give specific time limits? Your predecessor ministers had initiated decentralization of passport offices. I should think that we have 3 as at now. 6. When would we have 10 across all the regions?
Thank you, Honorable Chairman. This is so. We have major issues when it comes to securing passports for our citizens. Fortunately, the passport office has chalked a lot of successes in terms of decentralizing passport acquisition. As we speak, we have what we call the passport application centers in 6 regions of the country. I will assure the House that just as my predecessor has increased it from what it was, I would also, if I'm given the nod, also work towards having passport application centers in the rest of the 4, which is in Akufo-Addo, representing the Eastern region, in the Upper East, Upper West, Wa and Bulga, and then the last one would be in Cape Coast, the Central region. So yes, and then let me say that plans are far advanced, as we say in Ghana. We have identified, when I say we, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs has identified properties in all 4. In some cases, they've been offered the properties by the regional administration of those regions. And therefore, what is left is for some money to be made available for renovation, and then they can set up in the 4 areas left. So it shouldn't take us too long. I can't put a time frame to it, but I can see it happening within, if I'm being very generous with time, within 2 years. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Related to that is Muslims, pilgrims who have to travel to Mecca for an important religious and spiritual exercise of Hajj. Can we have some assurances from you what you will do to allow their speedy and ready access to passport to enable them make the trip?
Thank you, Honorable Chairman. I think firsthand I've experienced the kind of problems that Muslim pilgrims go through. My constituency has a lot of Muslims there, and I know when it comes to going on the Hajj, it creates a lot of problems in even acquisition of passports. I think the system has improved in that the passport office has, during this period, has allocated some days where they deal with Hajj applications. And I think that has sort of
so can I just have your assurance?
Yes, you have my assurance.
Special attention,
we'll look at
special
it and even improve
relationship
upon
with
it.
whatever committee has to work
Yes,
to
with the
ensure
Hajj
that
board.
pilgrims are guaranteed early access to their passport to enable them make this important journey.
Yes, Honorable Chair.
Related to that, your predecessor minister was very passionate, and I recall I had the privilege to work with her in cabinet, that the 50 million that the Honorable Apiaje referred to, the Honorable Hannah Sewatete's position was to argue for a retention of the ministry's IGF as security to guarantee this $50 million. Will that be your position?
Honorable Chairman, that is exactly my position. 25% retention is not enough. And even then, we do not always, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs does not always get that money. I would even go further to advocate for an increase in the retention so that the ministry is not always cash-strapped, which is the case. This is a ministry that is always cash-strapped. Thank you.
Chairman, thank you once again. The matter that the Honorable Okujeto raised vis-a-vis Morocco versus the Sahrawi Arab Republic, are you aware that at the last TICAD meeting in Nairobi, Morocco declined taking their seat if Sahrawi Arab was not withdrawn from the meeting?
Honorable Chairman, I'm not aware. I haven't come across any such
What will be your advice as we seek in handling this delicate diplomatic matter?
Honorable Chairman, this is a difficult one. This will be handled, I believe, at the level of the heads of states. And these matters, but of course, it will come to the Executive Council, which is made up of foreign ministers. I am new, so if you will.
We will. Chairman, my next question is on Britain and on Brexit